My name is Denise Denman, and I was 19 years old when I found out my college fund was gone. Not oops, we had an emergency gone. Not we borrowed a little and meant to replace it gone, but completely erased. Drained. Siphoned off quietly over 2 years without a single word until the truth hit me like a brick wall the week before tuition was due. I've always been the quiet one, the girl who followed rules because rules made sense. I didn't rebel, didn't sneak out, didn't experiment just to feel something. Straight A's came naturally to me, but I still worked for them. I picked up my first part-time job at 15 and never missed a shift. I didn't drink. I didn't party. I didn't date around. I had one goal: get into a good engineering program, build a stable life, something solid and earned, not flashy, just real. I grew up in a modest suburban home in Oregon with my parents and my older sister Jessica, who was 5 years ahead of me in age and light years ahead of me in our parents' eyes. Jessica was the golden child, the kind of person who walked into a room and bent it around herself. She was charming, confident, magnetic. Teachers adored her. Friends followed her. My parents worshipped her. When she won a middle school science fair, it was treated like a historic achievement. When I won one 2 years later, I got a nod and a distracted smile. For a long time, I didn't resent her. I admired her. I wanted to be like her. She wasn't stupid, just effortlessly convincing. She knew how to sell herself, how to talk big, how to make people believe. And my parents believed everything she said. By the time I was finishing my senior year of high school, Jessica had already dropped out of college, an act my parents somehow reframed as bold independence. She called it betting on herself. She'd started a startup with friends, though. What the company actually did changed depending on the week. Crypto 1 month, digital art the next, AI tools after that. I didn't ask questions. I was focused on my own future. When I got accepted into the engineering program I'd dreamed about for years, not Ivy League but respected, I thought maybe things would finally shift. My dad shook my hand. My mom smiled and said she was proud. Then Jessica walked in talking about a potential investor, and just like that, the room tilted back toward her. Still, I believed in the plan. My parents had opened a 5 and 29 education account when I was 6. It wasn't huge, but it was enough. I even chose the cheaper dorm out of respect. That summer before college, I worked nonstop lifeguarding by day, delivering food by night, buying used textbooks, and preparing myself for the hardest year of my life. That's when I noticed the tension. Whispered conversations, my mom checking the mail with tight shoulders, my dad snapping over nothing, Jessica pacing the garage late into the night. Then came the financial aid meeting. I handed my mom the paperwork while she was making coffee. She stared at it a second too long. "Is something wrong?" I asked. She smiled small-forced. "Don't worry about it. I'll handle it." But I did worry. The family car disappeared for days and came back with different tires. My dad's watch vanished. My mom sold jewelry. Jessica started coming home exhausted, empty-eyed. And then one night I overheard everything. "We weren't supposed to dip that deep into the 529, my dad whispered. "It's temporary," Jessica replied calmly. "She'll be fine. She can get loans." I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I thought they might hear it. That was the moment everything I believed in cracked. I didn't confront them that night. I just sat on my bed staring at the wall, feeling something inside me go very, very quiet. 5 days, that's how long I had until tuition was due. And my future was already gone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, uneven circles, the hum scraping against my nerves. Every few seconds, my brain replayed the same sentence over and over like it was trying to carve it into me. She'll be fine. She can get loans. The casualness of it was what hurt the most, not the theft, not even the betrayal. It was the certainty with which my future had been dismissed like it was an inconvenience, like it was negotiable. The next morning, I waited until my dad left for work and Jessica was still asleep before confronting my mom. She was at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, a mug of coffee untouched in front of her. I stood there for a long moment, hoping she'd look up and say something first. She didn't. "Is my college fund still there?" I asked finally. She froze, not dramatically, just enough to tell me everything. "Denise," she said softly, like she was already preparing to soothe me. "Things have been complicated." That was all it took. I felt something hollow open up in my chest like a trapdoor giving way. Complicated how I asked, though I already knew. She exhaled long and shaky, and then her face crumpled. Tears welled up fast, spilling over as she reached for my hand. "We didn't mean to use all of it," she said. "Jessica's startup ran into trouble, and we thought we could replace the money before anyone noticed. We really believed in her. We still do." I pulled my hand back. "You emptied it," I said, my voice strangely calm. "Didn't you?" She nodded, wiping her cheeks. "We're a family," she whispered. "Families support each other." I stared at her, stunned by how easily the words came out of her mouth. Like that phrase was supposed to fix everything. Like it was a spell she could cast to undo months of lies. "I did everything right," I said quietly. "I worked, I saved, I followed every rule you set, and you let her take it anyway." She tried to hug me then, but I stepped back. I couldn't stand the thought of being held together by the same arms that had signed off on my future disappearing. Later that afternoon, I called the university myself. I sat on the edge of my bed with my laptop open, my fingers numb as I typed in my student ID. The financial aid officer's voice was polite, professional, and devastating. "The linked 529 account was fully withdrawn 6 months ago," she said. "The balance is zero. Zero. Not reduced, not paused, gone." Because my parents' income still looks solid on paper, I didn't qualify for emergency federal aid. Private loans required a cosigner, and even if I found one, approval wouldn't come in time. The tuition deadline was still looming, immovable and cruel. That night, I skipped dinner. I locked my door and stared at my acceptance letter, the one I'd framed like a trophy. It didn't feel like pride anymore. It felt like evidence of something I'd lost before I ever got to touch it. When Jessica finally cornered me the next morning, she didn't even pretend to be sorry. "Look," she said, leaning against my doorway like we were just having a casual disagreement. I didn't want to make it, but we were in a bind. "You're smart. You'll figure it out." "You stole my future," I said, my hands shaking at my sides. She raised an eyebrow. "Relax. You're 19. People bounce back from worse. College is kind of a scam anyway." That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not explosively, but completely, like a door slamming shut behind me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. Done being reasonable. Done being invisible. Done being the responsible one who absorbed the fallout, so Jessica could keep chasing fantasies without consequences. They thought I'd roll over, that I'd adjust, that I'd quietly rearrange my life around the hole they'd blown through it. What they didn't know, what none of them had realized yet, was that I still had something left. And I wasn't going to waste it. The house changed after that. Not in any obvious way. There were no slammed doors or screaming matches, but the air grew heavy, like every room was holding its breath. I moved through it quietly, eating, when no one else was around, answering questions with one-word replies, keeping my eyes down. It wasn't fear, it was restraint. I knew if I let myself speak freely, something ugly would come out, and I wasn't ready for that yet. Jessica, on the other hand, grew louder. 3 days after I found out about the fund, she came home waving a crumpled flyer like it was a winning lottery ticket. Guess what she said, grinning? "New co-working space downtown. Exposed brick kombucha bar, standing desks, the works." My dad lowered his newspaper. "How much?" "Only $650 a month if I sign now. I found someone online to split it with me." My mom smiled like she was hearing good news. "That sounds like a great opportunity. You'll be so much more productive there." I set my fork down slowly. "Where is that money coming from?" I asked. Jessica blinked at me. "What?" "You said $650 a month," I repeated. "So I'm just wondering if you found a new source of income, or if this is another withdrawal from the bank of Denise." My mom flinched. "Denise, no." "Yes," I said, my voice sharp now. "I want to know. Because last I checked, we're broke, but somehow there's still money for kombucha and exposed brick." Jessica rolled her eyes. "It's called investing in the business." "It's called draining the only savings I had," I shot back. My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. "You took everything, and now you want more." "Denise," my dad said firmly, "sit down." "No." The word came out before I could stop it. Clear, loud. "You told me my education mattered," I said, standing. Now my hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. "You made me turn down out-of-state scholarships because we had a plan. You promised me I'd graduate debt-free. And now I'm supposed to clap while she burns through what's left." "Watch your tone," my dad warned. I laughed then, not because anything was funny, but because disbelief had nowhere else to go. I've been helping since I was 15, working shifts while she networked. I didn't ask for much, just one chance at a normal life. Jessica leaned back in her chair unfazed. "You're being dramatic." That was when my dad slammed his fist on the table. The sound echoed through the kitchen, sharp and final. I will not have this kind of toxic energy in my house, he said. You will not tear down your sister just because you're going through a rough patch. I stared at him stunned. A rough patch. That was how he saw it. That was how all of them saw it. In that moment, I understood something I'd spent my whole life refusing to admit in this family. I wasn't the victim of circumstance. I was the inconvenience. I left the table without another word and packed a bag that night. I stayed on a friend's couch for 2 days, just to breathe. When I came back, the house was calm again, like nothing had happened. That's when I saw the letter. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, neatly typed. No greeting, no warmth, just logistics. Effective immediately, you will be required to contribute $400 per month toward household expenses. If you are unable to do so, we will need to reevaluate your living arrangement. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. They drained my college fund, and now they wanted rent. When I confronted them, my mom looked genuinely surprised. You're an adult now, she said. It's time you started pulling your weight. I stared at her, something cold settling in my chest. I'm not living here like this, I said quietly. That night I locked my door and didn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, realizing the truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their backup plan. The next morning I woke up with the strange, weightless feeling that comes right after something inside you dies. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt hollow, like my body was moving forward while my emotions lagged somewhere behind, still trying to catch up. The house was quiet. Too quiet. That should have been my first warning. When I went downstairs, my room no longer felt like it belonged to me. My desk drawer was open. My laptop had been shifted. The folder where I kept old bank statements was gone. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the evidence, my stomach twisting. When I asked my mom about it, she didn't even deny it. I just needed to check something, she said, carefully folding laundry without meeting my eyes. You've been so distant lately. The violation hit me harder than the rent letter ever had. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd taken my privacy, my autonomy, the last scraps of trust I'd been clinging to. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started observing. For the next few days, I played the part they expected. I was polite, calm, agreeable. I told them maybe they were right, that maybe I needed time to regroup, that school could wait. I watched their shoulders relax, watched my mom's relief, watched Jessica smirk like she'd won something. They thought I was breaking. They had no idea I was building distance brick by brick. The real break came on a Tuesday night. My dad called it a family meeting. The phrase alone made my skin prickle. When I walked into the living room, I saw Jessica sprawled comfortably in the recliner like she owned the place. My mom sat beside her, hands folded neatly in her lap. My dad stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. I didn't sit. We've been thinking about your future, my dad began, his voice unusually gentle. About what's best for everyone. I said nothing. Sometimes my mom added softly, plans change. Dreams evolve. Get to the point, I said. Jessica smiled. We think it would be smart if you took a break from school, my dad said quickly. Just for now. Until things stabilize. I stared at him. And do what? Jessica leaned forward. Work full-time. Something stable. Retail tech support, whatever. Just enough to help the family get back on its feet. I felt dizzy. Let me guess, I said quietly. You keep working on the startup. Her grin widened. Exactly. Once things turn around, everything changes. That was when it finally clicked. This wasn't about helping me. This wasn't about recovery. This was about sacrifice. Mine. You already took my education, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Now you want me to walk away from what's left so she can keep chasing something that's already failed. You're being dramatic, my mom murmured. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no hurt. Just clarity. I'm not dropping out, I said, and I'm not paying a cent toward her debt. My dad stiffened. Denise, I'm done, I said, cutting him off. I'm done fixing her mistakes. And then I walked out. I didn't have a plan that night. I just drove. Ended up at a 24-hour diner, sitting in a cracked vinyl booth, sipping burnt coffee, while the rain blurred the streetlights outside. I must have looked exhausted because the waitress brought me fries without asking. That was rock bottom. No money, no dorm, no safety net. Just me, my thoughts, and the quiet realization that my family had already moved on without me. So I did the only thing left. I started over. I slept on a futon the first night. Then another after that. The studio apartment belonged to a friend of a friend. someone who barely knew me, but knew enough to recognize desperation when it showed up at their door with a duffel bag and hollow eyes. The place smelled faintly of instant noodles and laundry detergent, and the window didn't quite close all the way, letting in a constant draft that hummed through the night. I didn't complain. I was grateful just to exist somewhere that didn't feel like a negotiation. The morning after I left, I called my academic advisor. My voice shook at first, then steadied as I spoke. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough. She listened without interrupting, without judgment, and when I finished, she sighed, not with disappointment, but with resolve. "We're not going to let you disappear," she said. "There are emergency grants, department funds, work-study positions that don't advertise publicly. It won't be easy, but it's possible." Possible. The word felt fragile, like it might shatter if I held it too tightly. I spent the next week in motion. I applied for everything: grants, micro-scholarships, hardship assistance, tutoring positions. I worked days at a hardware store, nights delivering food, weekends teaching math online to high school students who complained about calculus while I silently envied their certainty that someone else would pay their bills. I ate cheap. Ramen, eggs, whatever was left at the end of the night. I sold old electronics. I canceled everything that wasn't survival. And slowly, painfully slowly, the pieces began to align. I re-enrolled part-time. It meant extending my degree by a year, maybe more, but it was better than losing it entirely. I carried my laptop everywhere, squeezing in study sessions between shifts, watching lectures at 1 a.m., while the city outside the window went quiet. My GPA held, barely at first, then steadily. One night, while scrolling through a forum for broke students, I saw a post looking for someone to build a simple prototype for a small inventory app. The pay was low, the timeline was tight. I took it anyway. That job led to another, then another after that. Small businesses, local shops, internal dashboards no one would ever brag about on social media. But they worked. They solved real problems. And I realized something that startled me in its simplicity. I was good at this. While my sister chased buzzwords and pitch decks, I was building things that functioned. No investors, no applause, just results. Each solved bug chipped away at the bitterness inside me. Each completed project made me stand a little straighter. I stopped checking my phone for messages from home. I blocked Jessica's number. My parents texted a few times, polite, empty check-ins that never once included an apology. I didn't respond. I needed space to become someone they couldn't rewrite. 6 months after that Tuesday night, an email landed in my inbox that made my hands tremble. A startup accelerator. Fully remote. Small grant. Mentorship. A client had nominated me. I read it 3 times before it sank in. This wasn't a miracle. It wasn't revenge. It was momentum. And it changed everything. Because while I was rebuilding my life piece by piece, learning what it meant to stand on my own, I started to see something else with unsettling clarity. They thought I'd disappeared. They had no idea I was watching. I didn't set out to dig up the truth. At first, all I wanted was distance space wide enough that their choices couldn't keep cutting into me. But distance has a way of sharpening memory. Once the noise fades, you start replaying moments you brushed past before, things that felt off, requests that didn't sit right, casual favors that in hindsight carried weight. Like the time Jessica asked for my student ID number because she said a co-working space offered a student verification discount. Or when she needed access to my old email just to check something because a form hadn't gone through. Or the night she asked for my bank login to confirm the routing number for the education account, promising she wouldn't touch anything. Back then, I'd trusted her, trusted them. Now that trust curdled into something colder. The shift happened quietly one evening after a long delivery shift. I was sitting on the futon laptop, balanced on my knees, trying to reconcile my finances for the month. I needed to know exactly how much I had, how long I could stretch it. I logged into an old account I hadn't checked in a while and noticed something strange. There was activity I didn't recognize. Not just withdrawals. Paperwork. Authorizations. My name attached to places I'd never agreed to be part of. My pulse started to race. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a mistake, a misunderstanding. But once the door opened, I couldn't close it again. I started pulling records, old emails, archived statements, browser histories I hadn't cleared in years. Every spare hour went into it. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. The 529 account hadn't just been emptied. Money had been transferred into a separate business account under Jessica's control, an account opened using my information as a co-signer. Digital signatures that weren't mine. Authorizations I never granted. Charges that had nothing to do with any startup expense flights, high-end electronics. A branding consultant who charged over $1,000 for a logo that looked like it had been slapped together in an afternoon. Some of those charges happened after they told me the fund was gone. I felt sick. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't panic. I did something better. I documented everything. Screenshots, PDFs, timestamps. I created an encrypted folder on a cloud drive under an alias email locked behind two-factor authentication. I labeled files carefully, methodically, like I was building a case, because that's exactly what I was doing. But I needed context, proof that this wasn't just my word against theirs. So I reached out to someone I barely knew, but suddenly remembered with clarity. Daniel, one of Jessica's former co-founders. He'd vanished months before everything fell apart. I found him through a mutual contact, sent a short message, nothing dramatic. He replied the same day. "I've been waiting for someone to ask," he wrote. "What do you want to know?" We talked for 2 hours. He told me everything. The fake milestones, the non-existent partnerships, the pitch decks built on exaggeration and outright lies. There were no contracts, no equity agreements, just vague promises and pressure. When he asked questions, he was pushed out. And yes, my name was on documents, listed as a technical advisor, someone reliable, someone safe, someone who had never agreed to any of it. Daniel sent me files, emails, chat logs, old presentations. Each one felt like another piece snapping into place. By the time I closed my laptop that night, my hands were steady. I wasn't angry anymore. I was prepared. Because the truth had a weight to it, and once I held it fully, I understood something important. This wasn't just betrayal. This was fraud, and I finally had the proof to prove it. I didn't rush. That was the mistake everyone else in my family always made, confusing speed with strength, urgency with power. Jessica burned bright and fast, convincing people something big was always just around the corner. My parents reacted, scrambled, smoothed things over. I'd spent my whole life watching them move first and think later. So I waited. I kept working, kept building. The accelerator opened doors I hadn't even known existed. Mentors who didn't care about confidence or charisma, only about whether something worked. My freelance work turned into steady contracts. One recruiter reached out, then another. For the first time, my future didn't feel theoretical. It felt tangible. That's when the leverage became real. With my documentation organized and cross-checked, I made a move so quiet it felt anticlimactic. One email, then another. A fraud tip submitted to a state regulatory agency. An anonymous report to a partner bank Jessica had bragged about online. A complaint filed with the Small Business Bureau backed by timestamp screenshots and digital signatures that didn't match mine. I didn't use emotional language. I didn't accuse. I simply presented facts. Then I went back to my life. Weeks passed. Nothing happened, or at least nothing I could see. That was fine. Systems like this don't explode, they crack slowly under pressure. The first sign came in a voicemail from my mom. I didn't answer. I listened later, sitting on the edge of my bed, the city humming outside my window. "Denise," she said, her voice tight, brittle. "Please call me back. It's about Jessica. She's in trouble. Serious trouble. We could really use your help." There was no apology in her voice, just panic. I didn't call back. 2 days later, a message appeared in my inbox from an account with no profile picture. One sentence. "Jessica is being investigated." I stared at the screen, then closed my laptop and went to work. A week after that, I saw it for myself. Jessica's social media went dark. Her startup website vanished. Her LinkedIn profile was scrubbed clean, stripped down to a generic headline that read, "Entrepreneurial Enthusiast." No company, no milestones, no buzzwords. Then my mom called again. This time I answered. "They froze her account," she said, words tumbling over each other. "There's an investigation. Some of the documents didn't match up, and your name was listed as an officer. They think there was identity fraud." I said nothing. "They might press charges," she continued, voice breaking. "She's scared. We're all scared. If there's anything you can do." "You signed off on it," I said quietly. Silence. "You let her drain my future," I continued. "And now that hers is on fire, you want me to save it." "We didn't think it would go this far," she whispered. "You never do," I said. And then I hung up. The investigation didn't explode overnight. It didn't need to. Once it started, everything unraveled on its own. A local news site published a short piece about a former startup founder under review for financial misconduct. No name at first, but the tech community doesn't need names. They connect dots fast. Former collaborators spoke up. One of them published a detailed breakdown of the fake company timeline. Screenshots surfaced. Claims were debunked. Every exaggeration Jessica had posted became evidence against her. My parents tried damage control, quiet apologies to the wrong people, explanations that came too late. I heard through someone else that my dad had moved into a motel for a while, that the house was being refinanced. That money was gone. They never asked how I was doing. They only asked if I could help. I didn't, because for the first time in my life, the roles were reversed. They needed me. And I finally understood that walking away wasn't cruelty. It was self-respect. Once the investigation became public, everything sped up and slowed down at the same time. News didn't break. Like a thunderclap, it seeped. A headline here, a comment thread there, whispers that grew teeth. The tech world has a short memory for success and an unforgiving one for fraud. And Jessica's name, once spoken with admiration, started appearing next to words like misrepresentation and identity misuse. She tried to rebrand, changed her profile picture, wiped her old posts, started sharing vague reflections about learning from failure and resilience in entrepreneurship. It fooled no one. Former collaborators chimed in, correcting the record with screenshots and receipts. One company issued a cease and desist for being falsely listed as a partner. Another accused her of scraping open source code and passing it off as proprietary work. The illusion didn't just crack, it collapsed inward. My parents unraveled quietly. They didn't rage or threaten. They shrank. The house I grew up in, once filled with plans and reassurances, became a liability. Refinancing turned into foreclosure. I heard secondhand that my dad spent weeks in a motel while my mom tried to piece together part-time work to cover gaps that had grown too wide to bridge. For years, they'd bet everything on Jessica's momentum. When it failed, there was nothing left underneath. They never reached out to ask for forgiveness. Not really. When they contacted me at all, it was practical, urgent, focused on what I could do now that I was stable, now that I had potential. The irony didn't escape me. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I didn't toast to it or savor it the way revenge stories promise you will. What I felt was lighter than joy and heavier than relief, like setting down a load you didn't realize you'd been carrying your whole life. I wasn't responsible for their choices anymore. I didn't need to absorb the consequences of their favoritism. And for the first time, I could look at my past without flinching. While the dust settled behind me, my life kept moving forward. The accelerator led to partnerships. Partnerships led to trust. Trust led to opportunity. I joined a small team working on a real product one with users' contracts and accountability. Not hype, not slogans, just steady progress. I paid down the last of my student debt within a year. I moved into an apartment of my own and framed my degree when it finally arrived in the mail. One afternoon, as I opened a new savings account, I paused at the label field and smiled. I named it simply Denise's Fund. Not for tuition, not for emergencies, just for me. Secure, untouchable, earned. A few months later, an email slipped through my filters. From Jessica, no subject line. A block of text accusing, bitter, defensive. She knew I'd had something to do with it, she wrote. She always knew I was jealous. She hoped it was worth it. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. By then I understood something I'd spent years learning the hard way. Trust isn't about blood. It's about respect. And once that's gone, there's no rebuilding it with apologies that arrive only after consequences. I didn't win because they lost. I won because I chose myself and built something real while they chased something fake. There's a strange quiet that settles in after everything ends. Not the dramatic kind, no slammed doors, no final speeches, but the stillness that comes when the noise finally burns itself out and there's nothing left to react to. That's where I found myself a few months after everything with Jessica and my parents collapsed. No more late-night voicemails, no more secondhand updates from mutual acquaintances, no more wondering what disaster might come next. Just silence. And for the first time in my life, that silence belonged to me. By then, my work had taken on a rhythm that felt almost unreal compared to the chaos I'd come from. The accelerator connected me with people who spoke plainly, who asked hard questions, who didn't mistake confidence for competence. One of my earliest clients, Mark, a product manager who'd watched me quietly solve problems no one else wanted to touch, reached out one afternoon and asked if I'd ever considered building something instead of hopping from contract to contract. That conversation led to another, then another after that. Eventually, I found myself sitting across from Elena, a data analyst with a clear vision and none of the delusions I'd grown up around. She didn't talk about changing the world. She talked about users, infrastructure, long-term viability. She needed a technical partner, not a mascot, not a pitch artist, a builder. So we built slowly, carefully, with contracts signed and responsibilities defined. We incorporated properly. We argued about architecture and timelines and budgets. We tested, we failed, we fixed things. We launched quietly. No flashy announcements, no manufactured hype. And then people started using it. Real users, real feedback, real revenue. The first time our product covered my rent for the month, I sat on my kitchen floor and cried. Not because I'd made it, but because I finally felt safe. Not financially invincible, not untouchable, just safe enough to plan without fear of everything collapsing because someone else wanted more than they'd earned. I paid off the last of my student debt shortly after. I upgraded my furniture piece by piece instead of all at once. I learned how to rest without guilt. I stopped bracing myself for impact every time my phone buzzed. Once out of curiosity, I searched my parents' address online. The listing was gone. Sold. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel pity. I felt distance, the healthy kind. The kind that lets scars heal without reopening them to check if they still hurt. The last contact I ever received from Jessica came months later. One line sent late at night. "You think you're better than me now." I stared at it for a long moment before locking my phone and setting it face down on the table. I didn't think I was better. I knew I was free. Free from being the backup plan. Free from cleaning up someone else's mess. Free from mistaking loyalty for self-erasure. I built my life without shortcuts, without borrowed money, without stolen trust. And that was the real ending. Not revenge, not vindication. Just a quiet truth I carry with me now, steady and unshakable. I didn't lose my future. I reclaimed it.